Bernard Law, the name alone commanded respect on Wall Street. For decades, he was a legend. The master of risk management. The man who beat the market. People came to him when they needed help, when they wanted to invest, when they wanted to secure their future. They wanted Bernard Law, and he delivered time and time again. At least that's what he made everyone believe. Because in reality, Bernard Law was running the biggest Ponzi scheme in history. It began with a promise of steady profits, a promise of safety, a promise of trust. The kind of promise that seemed impossible in the chaos of Wall Street. But one man convinced the world it was real. And with nothing more than paper, lies, and confidence, he built an empire that spanned the globe. At its peak, it held more than $50 billion, and then overnight it collapsed. This is the story of how trust took $50 billion. The first step is always the same. Find someone people trust, someone with connections, someone respectable, someone like Bernard Law. Back in the 60s and 70s, he became famous for creating complex financial instruments. He helped banks manage risk. He advised governments on economic policy. And slowly he built an image, a reputation as a genius, as a financial wizard, as the man who could make money in any market. But in the early 1990s, he created a new character, a billionaire investor with a mysterious past. Rumors said he had ties to the Italian mob. Others said he was a former CIA operative. No one knew for sure because he cultivated mystery. And that mystery attracted investors. It gave him an edge. It gave him credibility. And soon he had a steady stream of clients. They trusted him, they believed in his genius, and they handed over their money without asking too many questions. And that was the second step. Ask for just a little bit more. Because even geniuses need a little help, right? So he started small, taking small fees from each client. But those fees added up quickly, and soon he was making millions every single month. His reputation grew, his assets grew, and so did his ambitions. In 2001, he promised investors a 7% return, not too high, not too flashy, just enough to attract attention. And then he promised safety. Safety in a volatile world, safety from market crashes, safety from inflation, safety from everything. His clients didn't care how he did it, they just wanted results. And for years he delivered. He paid investors, reinvested their money, and profited handsomely. But there was no secret strategy, there was no magic. He simply used money from new investors to pay old investors to pay old investors. And when new money stopped coming in, the whole thing collapsed. Now this isn't unique. In fact, this is the oldest trick in the book. It goes back to Charles Ponzi in the 1920s. He promised investors incredible returns by exploiting differences in international postage stamps. It sounded clever. It sounded real. And for a while it worked. But there was no secret strategy. He simply used money from new investors to pay old investors to pay old investors. And when new money stopped coming in, the whole thing collapsed. But here's the difference. Ponzi operated on the fringes. He promised 50% returns. His investors were mostly gamblers. They understood risk. They understood volatility. But Bernard Law didn't operate on the fringes. He was Wall Street royalty. He was the darling of the financial press. He advised the best and the brightest, and he promised them safety. The third step is to convince people that there is no risk, to promise safety in a volatile world. That's what makes Ponzi schemes so dangerous. Because they prey on our desire for safety, our fear of loss, our need for certainty. We all want consistent results. We all want reliable investments, and that's what Bernie Law promised. He promised boring, predictable results. And that's why people fell for it. It wasn't just average investors either. Banks trusted him, pension funds trusted him, celebrities and athletes trusted him. And that's how the snowball rolled. The more people he attracted, the more legitimate he seemed. And the more legitimate he seemed, the more money came in. At its peak, the scam was paying out $300 million a month. How much is that? Well, imagine you have a 9-to-5 job. Imagine working non-stop for 40 years. Imagine the total amount of money you'll make. That's how much Bernard Law was paying out every single month, and none of it was real. On paper, his firm managed $75 billion, but in reality, there was no money. There were no investments. There was no strategy. There was $50 billion worth of trust, but in 2008, that trust shattered. The financial crisis wiped out trillions. Investors panicked. They wanted their money back. But Bernie couldn't deliver because there was no money. The entire empire had been built on thin air. He confessed everything in 2009 and was sentenced to 150 years in prison, but that didn't bring the money back. Billionaires were left penniless. Retirees lost their life savings. And that's the thing about Ponzi schemes. They don't just take your money, they destroy your future. Now we know the formula. We know the steps, but that doesn't help us. Because today, new variations emerge every single day. Cryptocurrencies, NFTs, high-risk startups, anything that promises huge returns with no risk. It's always the same. And the truth is, it will probably never change. People will always look for easy money. They'll always fall for promises of safety, and some very smart people will take advantage of that. Because in finance, the most dangerous risk isn't volatility. It's not greed, it's trust. Because once trust is broken, even $50 billion can disappear overnight. That's all for today. See you next time.